Yes. And now the time is near.
No, and it's already time.
We face the final curtain. We are here, Bam. We are here on A Wonderful Chaos. We are going to be discussing reinventing sales on this episode, which is the episode number we're on right now?
75.
We're on the 75th episode of A Wonderful Chaos discussing reinventing sales. On what show is that?
You just said it.
I know, but I thought we might do it like kind of a nice transition.
Okay, 2, 3, 1.
A Wonderful Chaos. I'm good.
We're good.
Teeth check.
Teeth check.
So, in general, our episodes are more related to stories, people's passions, and things that others might connect to from their own lives. And this one, I throw in these curveballs every so often because we've discussed things like sales for at least 3 or 4 years now. And
he means between me and him.
Yes, not between us yet. And I thought, why wouldn't we just do a show on sales? We've spoken about it so long. And in fact, our first recordings were of us discussing sales, which we didn't record to put broadcast like this. But what I thought was, why don't we just bring that topic on, discuss it? Funnily enough, sales was where I started my, I call it my spiritual journey. Because what I found is that salespeople have some of the most challenging situations that anyone has to face. And yet, in a lot of ways, people put them down, or they don't see that it's really a skill, right? Of course, there's a lot of determination and there's a lot of self-motivation, but there is a skill to selling. And a lot of times people don't really understand that, right? Or they underestimate it, or they dismiss it. If you look at a company, a salesperson will often be being paid more than a CEO if they're a performer, because, hey, if you're working and making the money, then let's reward you, especially if that motivates you. So I thought it would be nice to go for a discussion around kind of what I've seen, what I feel like are the best practices, and specifically why I called it reinventing sales is because in a lot of the things that I'll do and we've discussed through the years, it's counterintuitive. So one might think, hey, that doesn't sound right. If you're thinking on a sort of a causal relationship, like I want the most money, so I'm going to charge the most. Or if you think more in a systemic or no kind of a longer term or relationship-based engagement, oh, maybe I'll do something that might not seem like it makes sense now, but some way down the road, all of a sudden it makes all the sense in the world. So that was it. That was my intro.
Nice.
And you? I mean, because I brought the subject in. We've discussed it for years. What came to your mind when we said we were going to do this topic?
Oh, the time I did cold calling.
Wow. And what was the cold calling specifically about when you did it?
Oh, just ask my assistant to come up with a list of all the international and national corporate companies in Europe.
Okay.
And I would call them already to get booked a year ahead for corporate events. Actually, anything that has to do with corporate. And
how did you engage them specifically? Like, what did you do?
What did I do? First, I would seek out positions. That was my first tryout. Like I would ask for event managers or organizers, and a lot of the times they were not the people that I would have to talk to. And
that's, by the way, I'd like to break it down slowly when we discuss this.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest traps of, like, I would almost call it the arrogant salesperson, thinking they know who they need to talk to before they talk to anyone in the company.
Yeah.
I see it all the time, especially with this kind of overly masculinized sort of way of seeing the world. Like, I know what needs to happen and how to do it.
Exactly.
And so when you say that, it's funny because I always find like the most important person that I speak to, obviously, is the person right in front of me. That goes without saying. But then there's this other aspect, is like that person who's now in front of me probably has the best idea of who the best person to speak to would be.
Yeah.
But we don't take that opportunity because there's a stupid arrogance like, hey, can you put me on together with the person who does event planning? As if that's the person who you know would be the right person to talk to.
It was an assumption. And I mean, I remember we had this discussion.
Yeah.
And you told me, hey, listen, talk to the people that answer the phone.
Yeah.
And befriend them and get to know them and figure out how they can help you.
Yeah.
And that's when I started doing relationships. But
well, give me a feel, because people that are listening might not understand what the difference would look like. So like if we were to play it and you were to call me and I was a secretary and I were to pick up the phone, give me an example of what you would have done before and how it would be different afterwards.
Well, my thinking behind it is I'm cold calling, and I don't want to pretend that I'm not cold calling. So I would already relieve myself from that being found out by just naming the thing that I was doing already as soon as they pick up the phone.
Yeah. So how would that look? Ring, ring. Hi, it's Andy here.
Hi, Andy. My name is Charles Dimitriou. I just found your name online, and I'm calling. I'm cold calling your company actually as a photographer, and I hope I could have a couple of minutes of your time.
Well, first of all, since it's the receptionist, the few minutes of their time, I don't know if I would have said it. I would have said, can you help me with maybe telling me who the best person to speak to would be regarding sort of these services?
Well, you know, I don't have it in my mind, but I started off like that. And as I progressed, I would adapt it. I just don't have it in my head anymore.
No. Well, I mean, you did it brilliantly. It was almost like if I was on the other end watching this episode and I said, you're going to ask someone for a few minutes of their time and you've never even met them before. Like in some ways I could hear the trigger from somebody.
Well, eventually it became 30 seconds of your time, 20 seconds of your time. Like, and then they would give me those 20 seconds.
Yeah. I think the hard thing is I don't necessarily ask for the 20 seconds. I'll say, listen, it'll be no more than 3 minutes. And if it goes over 3 minutes, then I'll make you aware of that. Because in a weird way, I'm managing the expectation as well. Because if I say 3 minutes and it goes to 5, then I'm not being authentic. So I would tend to say, hey, if you got 3 minutes, it's great. And I'll time it. And when we hit 3 minutes, if you're not interested, I'll let you know and we'll continue or whatever. And I think that's the interesting thing is that people, you know, there's like a certain weird disrespect that happens often when we think we have something that we think they need or they should buy. And it comes from this out of sync space.
Yeah.
So I always say the mindset I have is I can't know if whatever I have to offer is of value to you until we speak.
Beautifully put.
And so, and the only way I'll know that is if at least we have a moment to see if it makes sense. Yeah. And from that state of mind, different words come out of your mouth. Like there's a deep piece because I'm not trying to sell. I'm actually, and it feels emotionally in that state. I'm actually trying to see if there's a match.
Trying to see if it makes sense.
Yeah. And some people will be aggressive. It's funny. Even the ones that are aggressive, I really have a lot of compassion towards because they get harassed all the time. Yeah. So even acknowledging that in the call I've seen would often create rapport. And then through that, there would be sort of at least an appreciation of what was possible or not.
Yeah. I felt also the biggest skill was whatever came my way, not to take it personally. Like person might have someone had died or maybe they're having such a busy day that the last thing they want is me.
Yeah.
Or they just had a rude salesperson online and they're just done with that.
Yeah. And then you pay the consequence for it.
Yeah.
When you said, sorry, I interrupted you when you started because I really like to kind of break down your process. So the first thing you said is when you cold call or when you did that basically you were confronted with how do I begin my engagement by not necessarily assuming I know who I need to talk to.
Yeah.
And then in that way, if I summarize it now, it would be something in the range of these are the kind of things that I'm looking to offer. Can you help me? Who would be the best person to speak to regarding that in the company?
And sometimes they'd say, we have a photographer. Other times they'd say, do you have anything to send me?
Yeah.
And I'll pass it through.
Uh-huh.
So I always made sure I was prepared for that too.
Yeah. So like, and this is really good because this is interesting because I'm always like, since I'm always looking to see if there's a match, I've noticed a lot of people when they say we already have a photographer, then the immediate assumption is, okay, my services aren't interesting anymore.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I sort of adapted everything to, it's almost like an improvisation. If someone says, hey, we already have a photographer, I would always say, that's great. And how is that working for you?
Mm-hmm.
Like what I've found is the how is that working for you question doesn't assume good nor bad. And a lot of times they'll say, well, they're an in-house photographer. They don't do the trips with us, or they don't. So it may very well be that in the openness of the discussion, the fact that there are areas where that person doesn't cover, for instance, then I would say, you know, through that dialogue, would you be open to at least exploring if that might be a possibility somewhere down the future?
Yeah.
So it's always very light, but it doesn't just make the assumption if they say something, it's over. Yeah.
Well, sometimes that photographer might be sick, and by giving your details, you already become the next one in line, potentially, if you made a good first impression. And again, what I learned from you, Andy, is people want to work with people that they like.
Yeah.
So in general, I try to be as authentic and honest, just putting it there for them, showing my humanity actually, and allowing the chips to fall where they may.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, that's, you know, in a way, if there's anything I'm doing is just, I would almost say being authentic, because in some ways, when we go to that being liked, it's almost like if I'm authentic, then they have a chance to like me.
Well, yeah. It doesn't really work that way. Sometimes people are allergic to authentic people.
Well, I mean, that's
authentic behavior.
Yeah, but that's interesting because I would say authentic is interesting. That's a good point. I would say, this is funny.
Am I going to laugh?
I don't know. I have to go into a weird place in my brain right now.
Guys, so far I'm not crying, which means the ratings are not up yet.
Get tears. I think where I was feeling into was that I don't see authentic as a state of like okay, now I'm going to let everything be seen. Because a lot of people see authenticity with vulnerability, for instance.
Yeah.
And it may be vulnerable, but it may not be. So the authenticity in every situation may be different. So
well, I think I even shared once, I'm trying to figure out my business. So I'm just calling like just that transparent. Like I'm not the greatest. I didn't magnify myself, but so that will be something that I would share with the people that I'm calling.
Yeah, that would be it for me, going in the direction of authentic.
Yeah.
But authentic might even be, I'm really frustrated because I've tried to call 2 or 3 times. I haven't been able to get through to the person, although they promised me they'd be available. So that would also be authentic, but it wouldn't necessarily be vulnerable. It wouldn't be typical vulnerable. So
it's very personal how you shared it.
Yeah. And that's the weird thing. And that we might even give a whole episode to authenticity, because I think there's a lot of confusion in authenticity. People think authenticity equates to vulnerability. And I think authenticity is being true to your feelings and at the same time realizing there's a process going on in front of you. So it's not like I'm going to say the thing I want to say and destroy what's in front of me. I use the tension inside of myself and I bring it forward in a way to help a process move forward. And that's interesting. And I think people confuse authenticity with let's burn down every house that we hit. Because if I say the thing that I want to say, then all of a sudden I'm being authentic, but I destroy everything.
That sounds like radical honesty, actually.
Yeah, radical honesty.
Well, I also just want to say to the viewers that I did this and I got 0 results. And zero.
Yeah.
And at some point, my friends were like, bro, no one cold calls in these times. Like you gotta, I don't remember what the advice was, but it's not done.
Yeah.
Like get your LinkedIn, do this, do that. So I got other advice and I tried other things.
Yeah.
I mean,
how do you feel like you started your business?
You mean when I was going to the...
Well, I think we're doing two things. We're talking in entrepreneurial skills,
yeah,
against selling. And the hard thing with selling is it presumes you can sell. And that's where the tricky thing occurs in my life, is that when you make the assumption you can sell, you engage people from call it the presumption that they're going to be sold.
Yeah.
And it's that paradigm which I've seen create so much friction and push people away. So I'd say that sometimes things get purchased in spite of the person who's selling them. And the difference would be the person who's selling, if they see themselves as facilitating another through their own buying process, it's very different than thinking that you can sell. And the paradigm is such a drastic shift in your mental state that you actually engage in a wholly different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tried something different. I got inspired. I was at the organic market on Saturday. A guy comes up to me. He's like, "There's my business card." And I'm like, "Oh, what do you do?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm a barber." And he had such a cool energy. Like, I'm like, "Listen, I just do it myself. So I wouldn't use it. Yeah. But just because I like you, if I'll probably give it to my mentor or something because he likes barbers and you have a good vibe." Yeah. So that inspired me. And Sunday, I actually went and sat in a cafe and I saw people sitting around. And I saw this couple and I'm like, "Guys, this is my card. I'm a photographer. I work a lot with couples. And I just want to give you a 30-second experience." And they're like, "Okay, let's do it." But they felt and I'm like, "Okay, close your eyes. I want you to both imagine the first time you saw each other." And apparently they had a really awkward moment together. So, and then just reach out for each other. And then I said, this is how I would guide you through a pros for a shoot. And they were like, "Wow, this is really exciting." And I just told them, look at yourselves. You're smiling. So I kind of realized sometimes letting people get a taste of how it would feel like helps. And I gave them my card. They liked my card. It was quite fancy. So will they come? I don't know. But at some point they will need a photographer. And I based on the fact that they will not forget that moment that I shared with them, I'm pretty sure they will contact me.
Yeah. So in a weird way, you did, it was, if you were to say, it's always interesting because we're shifting from different types of sales.
Yeah.
If you call into a business, there's a lot of obstruction because you got to get through potentially a secretary who's got to get through to another secretary who's got to get to the next person who maybe has interest in whatever you have to offer. Yeah. So that would be that. Now you're saying I'm doing an entrepreneurial sales, basically one-to-one. So I'm consumer, basically selling to a consumer directly.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you're saying just by giving them an experience that they can then say, "Hey, this is something cool. Either I'm going to do it just because I just enjoyed it," or, yeah, I can totally see that. Of course, nothing's better actually when it comes to giving someone an experience. Yeah.
I mean, if I think about emails, yeah, I find emails to be really boring. Like as soon as I see a post that someone's looking for a photographer, I'm like, oh, like I just imagine everyone starts with the same thing. "Hello, I see you're looking for a photographer. These are da, 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 da." So in my brain is always like, how do I get out of that norm?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure it out. Like there is a guy out there who does something called charm offensive. So be quirky, funny, but I don't embody that. So if I do that, it feels it's not really coming from me.
Yeah.
It's like a copy paste of something.
Yeah, but I understand. I see when you said charm offensive, immediately I could feel into what that would feel like.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is that I always, again, it goes to authenticity. And I usually write from a very authentic place, which doesn't feel manufactured. And I tend to see people respond positively to that. So I'll write a lot of emails for people, the companies diversity. I don't know. It's so many things I've been writing lately.
He's done it for me too, guys.
And all I'm doing is I'm writing it from as if it's very, very connected to me. I think so. What I've noticed is what people like to do is they like to go to, let me tell you why you want to work with me. So it's a very much didactic sort of approach, as opposed to, hey, I saw your post. I'd love to. I usually, because I often find if I don't speak to somebody, basically my email is just like anyone else's email. So I'll push for a call before I'll try to engage them through email. So I'll always say, listen, basically, of course, I can do whatever it is you specified. I've done it a lot of times. How about we arrange a call just to see what makes sense? Like I try to keep it very abridged and get to the connection where one speaks, because I find that if you don't speak to somebody, you're held at an arm's length, and then they're not really assessing you based on any strength you have. They're basing it on who's the cheapest for whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd rather be in relationship when I go through that process. In fact, I often won't even go into any situation in my life if it's not in relationship. Not like I'm getting asked for bids or anything, but sometimes people will like assume that they can ask me for a question as if that's like, hey, give me your services. Can you give me a price of your services or something, as if like, hey, just you can ask and I'll respond.
Yeah.
And, I'll tend to say, hey, better to tell me what you want, what you're looking to achieve, and then I can tell you at least how much it costs or send you to somebody else. And I think that's where just confidence, there's an aspect of confidence that comes. I've seen it shift for you, where at first when someone sent you a question, you immediately fear-based respond, like I got to respond.
Yeah. Instead
of sort of taking your own value seriously and then engaging from a position of taking yourself seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that shift for you? Like what did you see change, and how did that feel? Do you remember it even?
Yeah, it was coming from poverty mentality, scarcity. Yeah.
I mean, there's the behavior that we discussed often, which drives me crazy in you, is that sometimes when I tell you something, you'll take it to such an extreme that you don't necessarily see that there's a context where it makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
And which one is the one that you think that it drives me crazy?
I think I drive you crazy in general, no?
No, one specific one.
Tell me.
Like I'm a big proponent. If you're not happy, then basically we're either going to figure out a way to make it, cheaper, make some sort of other offering. So at the end, we'll both be happy because, unless I'm being abused and manipulated, that's a whole nother thing. But let's assume for a moment that like you took photos and then that person didn't like the photos.
Yeah.
So my first thing would be, hey, you didn't like the photos, stuff happens. If you're open to it, we can do another reshoot. Or if you want, you don't even need to pay. Either way is fine with me. But, you won't get the pictures, obviously, if you don't pay. It's not like I'm going to give you the thing that you didn't like. And I've seen for you, like you've sort of taken my recommendation to find that and gone to extremes at times.
But the way you're talking, I do it all the time. I did it once.
You've done it before. No, you've done it before. Yeah. But it would have been some time ago.
No.
Oh, you don't remember? Okay.
No, this last time I really messed up. I gave it all. So that was really without exploring what they didn't like, and in the end, nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So
which it sometimes will, of course.
Yeah, and that was a painful lesson to learn. Yeah.
I'll have to think back because I emotionally, when this one came up, I thought, oh, this isn't the first time in my head. Although, of course, it may not have been, but it didn't feel like it was the first time in my head that it happened. Yeah, and that would be a sales. And the sales is based on, I want every relationship I'm in to be recognized as valuable. So I want everyone that I'm interacting with to see that we have a mutual value, and that as soon as I give the value away, they don't respect it anymore. And then they interact with you in ways that are really contorted. They don't show the respect of the value that was delivered, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I laugh because when I was working with my mentor Case, we would give the trainings away for free and no one would show up. Did it for years. Said, hey, we're going to do a training on a weekend. You know, we'd usually hire a location, so it would cost us money, and then no one would show up.
Because it didn't have no value.
Yeah, because the perceived value is attached to the value we applied to it. So once we did it, then we would charge $200 or something, or euros at the time. And then we get more people showing up just because if we say it's a value, then, hey, it must be a value. And even if we put the price tag on it and then some people couldn't afford it, then we wouldn't say, don't come. We would just say, hey, you know, we'll arrange something different. You know, Ronnie asked me before we got on the show, she said, Andy, can you tell me what are the principles you live by? Because she had to fill in some form, you know. And I said, well, one of them is like exchange of value, right? So it was in business. It was in the context of business.
Yeah.
So I said, like, if I deliver value and it's and we're in a reciprocal relationship, not like if it's charity or something, but if we're then I don't deliver the value without an expectation, a clear expectation on both sides of what the reciprocation of that value would be. Because what I've also seen in my life over and over is that if I just give, there's no recognition on the other side, and then it comes to haunt me. So that was one of the principles that we discussed.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's maybe where you might feel me. Sometimes I've given way too much on the journey of being a photographer because I didn't fully value myself.
Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier. What did you think of us?
I thought you were talking about the last scenario where the client wasn't happy.
I guess I was talking about the other one, this one, the one I just mentioned. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful because if you look at Google, you've got how many hundreds of people that have reviewed you?
168.
168 people. So you don't get 168, which are predominantly all really very positive, without having done the thing we're now discussing. But by the same token, there's a degree to which there's a balance in there where the gifting of things of value diminishes the actual the value, that the perceived value.
It's really tricky, like the art of giving something and making sure that it's acknowledged as value.
And you can't make sure this is a fun one because I see this happen a lot. You can't make sure of anything. You can only value it and then hold to that value. And if it's not acknowledged, be okay to walk away. So I think the thing you said, which is really quite nice, is a trap. Because if you're dependent ever on the other person to acknowledge the value, then you'll get stuck. The only person that needs to acknowledge the value is yourself.
And if you don't value it, then...
And then if you don't value it, they don't value it. I remember when I started my coaching. When I started my coaching, it was like Case, my mentor, again, he died. And maybe it was even before he died. And I started saying, I'm going to do some personal coaching work. So the first 6 months, I'm like, wow, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm scared. So let's charge $75. $75 an hour, right? And then you go and then you start to evolve and you see, well, I'm pretty good at this. And then I said, okay, so let's now do it at $125. And then you grow a little bit more. And then you're like, wow, I'm starting to work with higher level CEO people that are in venture capital, where there maybe the people who I'll be working with, every decision they make might have $1 million ramifications. And so you're like, okay, now I'm charging 125. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
So then you graduate, depending, of course, on what the perceived value is, your own perceived value, of course, but then what the market will bear. Because you could say, Andy, I'm $1,000 an hour photographer, and then you just get no photography, because no one can afford it. Yeah. So there's a balance in there.
That's why you also don't do so much work in Holland, right?
Yeah. I've noticed in the Netherlands, when leaders kind of, there's that, Americans have this whole thing with sharpening the blade. If you're in a high level position, part of your job is continually to evolve, continually better understand yourself so that you can serve the people you're working with better.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the Netherlands, there's a Calvinist way about it, which says, hey, basically, if I'm in the job not doing well, I don't deserve to be in that role. So it kind of is this very much a very different sort of mentality. So yeah, my clients, especially the higher level leaders, often managing much bigger businesses than the ones in the Netherlands that I'll be interacting with, they'll have me as a coach because each decision has implications that are far bigger than just this simple, hey, like, let's just have some fun today and make a whatever you call it, random decision of sorts.
Yeah, you'll be, and what I know from you, you'll be coaching not only in the business, but also in the personal.
Yeah, that's different. I mean, I guess when we talk about, I'll do life coaching, and I don't distinguish because in some ways, like I'll always say, whatever's showing up in the business shows up in the home. And it's not only the home, because, it bleeds back to mommy, daddy issues. So you're really, if you're working, in my case with somebody, you're taking whatever it is as this unconscious belief. You're helping them see that that's showing up in their business life as a pattern. And then of course, if you have a good relationship, you can move into different intimacy. And hopefully I try to, like, me, keep it strong and light, strong and light. So there's a directness and a loving kind of almost humor. In fact, tomorrow, the quintessential entrepreneur, so the woman who founded eMindful, she'll be on the show. And in her life, there was one of the best moments in my business life when I was sitting at the dinner table with her, because we were really very good friends as we went through this, supporting her in her business. It was her daughter, and her mother all in the line in front of me, and very similar traits, like in this intergenerational. So you're sitting there almost feeling like, it almost felt like if I'd taken like a drug, and now I'm kind of catapulted into 3 generations of a behavior over time, but it's in front of my face. It was fantastic.
Are we unpacking this tomorrow?
I don't know. We'll see. I just remember the mom was at the table. The mom she had on her pearls. She was at the old folks home that she went to, but she was very proper at the table. And I just remember having fun with her because she was so proper. Everyone was a little bit scared of her. So, of course, I just looked at her and said, so how's the sex at the old folks home? And you know what? The funny thing is, we had the whole night, we had the best talking, because it was almost like the harsh exterior. Everyone was treating her with such this anxiety and angst that just to have some fun, she's like, wow, I finally found someone that I can just have fun with,
So you had fun.
We had fun, yeah. Unfortunately, she passed away, I think, about a year ago now. So, yeah. Yeah. So when I look at sales, I think there's this woman I spoke about with you before. I mentioned her name a few times, Sharon Drew Morgan.
I think I interrupted you before.
What was that?
You were going to share the principles, and you only got to one.
I mean, the principles, we never leave a discussion, but that would be a personal principle, not a business principle. So, like, as you always know, and I always tell you, like Ronnie and I, we can never say, hey, we're not going to discuss that. We can say, hey, I don't want to discuss it now.
Yeah.
There's no allowance of, hey, I'm going to be, there's no living in avoidance. Yeah.
There's relationship first.
Yeah. Relationship first.
If there's no relationship, then
which is a hard one, because I think you use that word, but people, you went through the 15-month training.
Yeah.
And to live a relationship first is different than saying it. Like, I remember how when we did relationship first, you changed, you were even doing trainings, I think, or you're doing photo shoots, and you changed everything you did in the photo shoot after we had that first training. I remember thinking, I know I said it, but I don't necessarily feel like you took it to an extreme, which I think worked, but it was surprising for me. What did you do actually?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You actually said, Andy, before all of my things now. Oh, I remember now. You said there was a company that hired you, I believe, and there was like 15 or 20 people that needed headshots on the same day.
Yeah.
And you said, Andy, I would never have normally done that because I need to build a rapport to get the best photo from each person.
Yeah.
And you said, I'll do it under one condition, that I do a sort of
a group thing.
A group. I don't know what you call it.
It's literally like a team building.
You do like a team building exercise. And then I'm going to get them in a state of mind. So when I get the photo I want to get. And that's the way you applied the relationship first to that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was brilliant because you said, Andy, I can't go in, take 15 shots of people trying to get each one excited. And
well, they just wanted, no, it was 80 people.
Yeah. Okay.
And they wanted that I photograph them within 5 or 6 hours. So really like fast food, and hope that the pictures are good.
Yeah.
So I minimized the time frame and got really good shots.
Yeah.
So it went really fast.
It's beautiful. I think when we talk, sometimes it's hard to distinguish from the individual entrepreneur to the guy that's hired in sales in a corporate. And although the principles would be similar, the actual environment is so different. Because the individual in a corporate tends to have to sell things that they may not even be believing in per se.
Yeah.
They may just, hey, here's the thing you have to do, and this is the goal that you have for the year. Yeah.
We're an entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur hopefully loves what they do. If they don't, then that's like the worst, because all the benefit of being an entrepreneur is theoretically that you get to live the life of your dreams. So if you're actually now a slave to money, you've just replaced the corporate with a wholly different, you just become an employee of your own with all the liability
and stress.
And stress. I'm curious how this all shifts with COVID, by the way. Because if you think sales, right, you think of consumerism. If we look at how we used to deal with consumerism before, there was a pretty archaic way of us dealing with it. It was, you hire salespeople. Those salespeople either do the cold calling that you said isn't working as well as it would have in the past, or they'll do some sort of direct campaigns. But if you look at it, I spent a day with a friend who does a multi-level marketing in digital marketing strategies, and my mind was blown. Like the degree to which sales is so little about trying to create rapport, but trying to put a cookie when someone searches for something on your website and then retarget them with advertisements. Like the conversion of that is like something like 6 to 10 times greater than anything else you can do. So in the future, and not only the future, now, everyone's always saying, hey, they can read my mind. They can read my mind. Well, what I'm learning is that every time you do a search on a website where they have cookie, you drop the cookie and the cookie has some sort of 90-day
That's why they call it cookie
certificate. And then the person can then say, whatever website you are on, we'll drop in the advertisement because we know you showed interest in it in the past. And the statistics on that type of marketing are staggering.
Yeah.
So in the future, who knows, when we talk about this sort of relationship-based sales, I can imagine as we move forward, we'll see the greatest sales are going to be made by taking the interest of an individual and then just targeting them over and over again, because they've already expressed an interest. Then we're just going to try to see if we can continually engage them until they decide to purchase. I mean, it's
indirectly.
Indirectly, yeah. But if you look at it, there's so much thought given to it. I was looking at 4 companies. One who says they can even, I mean, this is how scary it gets. People that send you emails with long drawn out text in it. Basically, if you click on any aspect of that text, they can target what the response is to you based on where you clicked. So if you click on 5 parts of an email, then they'll know which part of the email you clicked on, and then they'll target you based on that with very strategic messages over a period of time, either through advertising or through direct email marketing. So the degree to which our information is being utilized by others is so far beyond what we could have. I mean, we all know it, but it's almost like the people that are leading that edge are going to certainly, they're going to be defining how sales move forward in the future, I believe. Yeah, because I often think, this idea, we're going to convince you of something you don't need or want. So this type of consumerism that we've seen since the Industrial Revolution, like you're happy if you buy this. Like your life just needs that one thing, and especially in America where there's a real strong thing of keeping up with the Joneses. We don't have that in the Netherlands. I don't know if you've had that when you were raised in wherever you.
What is that?
Well, basically, there's this idea that my success, my feeling of self-worth, my value is based on my competitive ranking against others in my same cohort. So I remember when I went to high school, you go to your 30th high school reunion. I didn't go to any of them, by the way, but you go to the reunions, and in general, there's this idea of how far have they gotten? How far have I gotten? Have I gotten further than them or not? And there's a real competition to that my life should be more successful than at least the people around me. And the same is true for houses. So if you get to a house and you're in a neighborhood, does that neighborhood have a pool? They have a Volvo and we have another car, So there's really a lot of that going on in the US. They call it keeping up with the Joneses. That's the term for it. I don't think that would be such in Cyprus, would it?
I actually, Andy, I stopped following you.
Okay. Well,
it was so much information that I was like, wow, I can't connect.
Think about it this way, is that in the future, assuming that consumerism decreases, there'll be less and less of people needing and wanting to buy shit that they don't need. That'll be the idea. And if that's the case, then people are going to follow people's searches, because if they search for something, we'll sell them what they want. We'll just get better at that. Yeah. Yeah. There's 20 other things I can talk about, so I leave space to see if there's things that you want to dig into.
I think the thing which comes from me is we're always selling.
Oh,
we took it to the business aspect, but sales are happening all the time.
How would you describe that?
Even in relationships, we are selling ourselves. Are we saying the right thing so the person likes us? If I see people walking on the street in certain outfits, are they attracting the attention that they invested in? Is it if I put a mask on, would that sell me? Or if I don't wear the mask, will that sell? Take the word sell and put love or worthy, success. Would that make sense?
I mean, you're bringing a much bigger level concept in, which is, and we'll use the words a lot, and we're saying one projects something onto someone, but to a large degree, either consciously or unconsciously, we create that by how we speak, dress, act, what we buy, all of it. So on one level, we may not be aware that we're trying to sell ourselves a certain way, but we are. And that would be very much tied to what we always talk about, personal identity, which we may or may not be in touch with. I remember when I was in college, I was very identified with being a sportsman, right? Like very identified. It was the first thing I was good at in life, that I felt good at, that gave me sense of purpose and meaning and achievement. And I remember like I had these, I'd go to class, but then I'd have to go to track practice afterwards. And I would always like tie my track shoes kind of hanging over my backpack. I probably could have shoved them in and they would have been fine. But I always like tied them up and hung them to like the side of the backpack. Because for me, it was like such a feeling like I want people to know and see me like this. So speaking to your point, I was selling the idea that this is who I am. And and I can certainly feel like when we spoke once, we were trying to find you corporate gigs and you had the big earrings in, and I said,
we're talking tunnels.
What are they called?
Tunnels.
Those are tunnels.
Plugs.
Well,
the bigger what was it?
The bigger the gauge, because the gauge is the circle size.
The lower the wage.
The lower the wage, yeah. And the thing was that if you wanted to get the corporate gigs, then people hiring you had to feel
that they can trust
comfortable that they could trust you. And if they felt like you were risky, then they'd be less. So in that way, you adjusted your outward appearance to make yourself more appealing or inviting or more acceptable to a certain group of people. Yeah. But you're going to laugh. I don't see that as a constant that shifts. So you may now potentially put the gauges back into your ears because you've already established yourself within that area. They've already seen you as being a little bit out there, and you've got a reputation. So in a weird way, I see it. Some people have gotten much wilder and become really great, and they've kind of taken that persona, and that's the reason why they've done so well. So it's never a fixed thing.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have them, right? And I'm looking at them, and it just doesn't feel like it's something I want to put back into my body.
Oh yeah.
So, and I mean, you've seen me, like, I'm not really wearing shirts during the COVID. I'm just wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I'm just running everywhere.
Ronnie always says that those shorts look like you're always wearing underwear outside. Why does Bambos run around in his underwear?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, they're short.
No, not these. I think they're the other ones you had on.
No, they're all the same design.
Yeah.
Sales.
I would say daily, that's pretty much all I do. Like you mentioned, it would be persona, but, I'll be asked to write a one-pager for someone who's fundraising for either their business or the nonprofit.
Yeah.
And to write the one-pager, I'll often find that I'm focusing in on the voice in my head that says, oh, that's what I'd be interested if I were that person. And that's they'll oftentimes in marketing, they'll call it the voice of the customer and who's the customer. And even when I laugh, because sometimes you'll make a presentation of PowerPoint and it'll look really good, but then you'll say, but who's the customer that's intended for? And it'll be 3 different presentations with the exact same material, just based on the fact that different people are going to be watching it with different needs and wants and desires. So when I'm working, it feels a lot like a meditation because I'll put on the hat of the individual who I'll be speaking to, and then I'll write to that hat. And that's why I find it easier than most, because most are like, how do I write it well? And I'm never preoccupied with writing well. I'm preoccupied with what's the voice I'm trying to connect to, and then the writing sort of comes more naturally then.
How did this Andy from the Andy in Vienna, who was who applied to 100 jobs and didn't get any?
Totally blind.
So you were just writing?
Oh, just writing. I just needed. It was all desperation, fear, all about I need. I'm scared. How am I going to survive? Am I going to have enough money? You know, just fear-based.
So it actually almost sounds like the difference is back then you were a needy lover. Like you always saw what you could get out of the relationship, and you were like very much in the begging.
Yeah, desperate.
And now you actually tune into your lover and kind of feel how you can make their life better.
No.
I
because the reason why I say no like that is because I see this about life. I will often talk about the paradoxes, and what you just said is half of the paradox for me, what they need or want, and
being in connection with yourself.
Yeah. And what I would say is connecting to what I want. So having that clear, and then seeing where that would meet what others may want. So there's no arrogance. There's not the presumption that they'd want it. And that's the navigation. And then what I will tend to do is not pretend like I don't want, because if I'm writing you, I want. No different than what you said when you were on the phone, say I'm cold calling, and then be authentic in that expression, but also be clear on, and this is the reasons why I believe you would want to. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's all about communications in the end. Like, you know, all the jobs I got, all the opportunities, you know, everyone, you could have always said, hey, he wasn't particularly qualified. There would have been better qualified people to do those roles. And then it would have been because I was able to communicate well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing that I still have so much to learn when it comes to sales.
And what makes you say that now?
Oh, just like I still can't, like if you ask me to sit down and write a letter, like that.
I know. All the time.
All the time.
How is that?
Just that logical brain's not there.
And you call it the logical brain. And
well, that's what you told me. You said, Bambos, you need to get a course on logic.
Yeah, but there was a reason for, I think it's also sometimes in the show. It's kind of interesting because we've talked about the show a lot. Well, Bambos will sometimes in the last week hasn't had a very easy time of it, so there'll be just sort of a shutdown. And then I think when I'll ask a question, it like comes from the ether. Like I don't even know what I'm going to ask before I open my mouth.
Yeah.
And I'm sensing like you're like, oh, what's my next question going to be? And then I'm waiting to ask that question. And I believe that up to the very moment I ask the question, I don't even know what I'm going to ask. So it's very much, and let's say I liked a question, but the person continued to talk, then I'm already wherever they are now, because wherever that question was, I'd be taking them back to a point that's no longer relevant for them per se.
Yeah.
And I think there's a confidence or comfort with letting go of the idea that I need to, and then speaking without knowing. And I don't know if that's confidence is in you yet. I would say it isn't in you yet.
Depends on the context.
Yeah.
I can give a workshop very comfortably without.
Okay, but go. So the right there at that moment, right?
Yeah.
You defended on the slightest.
Oh, was that defending?
Yeah. Not like a massive defense, but look into so where I would go there and say, oh yeah, I can totally see that. And where would you see that? And how does it show up? And where do you find it most? And what would it mean if I didn't do that?
So these are the sales questions that I didn't ask.
Yeah. For yourself in the end. And right or who cares? Like in my life, right or wrong is so irrelevant. It's the question is, if a statement is made, how willing am I to just investigate the depths of that statement? Or will I say, hey, it is right or it's not right? And I would say, so where your brain went was to this logical, let me think about what Andy said and let me see where it may or may not be right, right?
So investigate where it might be true so I can learn something about myself.
For instance. Yeah. And who cares? Maybe it was all bullshit, but you'd find that out by asking. Because if you ask someone questions and they've made a false assumption,
yeah,
the more you ask them questions and they talk, the more it'll be apparent that they really didn't know what they were talking about. And if you have any identity to defend, you'll react. Even if it's slight, it's not a massive defense, but it's like, I don't know.
I see that.
Yeah.
I see that.
But I mean, that speaks to a bigger being in the moment means I'm not attached to the thing that happens needing to be anything other than what it is in that moment. So in the interview process, it's also, you know, like there's a lot of times when we'll interview with people and you'll certainly want to dig deeper than they may be engaging us back. They might be a little bit more separated from their emotion as they talk to us, talking from a very analytical sort of space. So when you'll interact with them, sometimes you'll push them to go to emotional space, but necessarily showing yourself there. So saying, hey, you'll say, you're heady was a word you used with a guest before, right? Which if someone says they're heady, that's if someone did that to you, you get really pissed off.
Potentially.
Yeah, in the past, at least. So now you've done it to somebody else. So the only thing you can say is, all I do is I see I'm not feeling connected. I want to sell them, right? Because that's what you really want to do. I want to sell them on the idea that maybe they might join us to a more emotional engagement. So how do I do that? Meeting myself and them. That's the big challenge. And then how I've learned to do it, and that's just everyone does it their own way. I've learned to do it is to say, hey, this has been my experience, but not my experience of them, my experience. I've noticed that throughout the years when I talk on these shows, I don't necessarily feel comfortable being vulnerable. How is it for you? For instance. And then through that engagement, you start to kind of wheedle down to a more intimate space with them without having to say, hey, I think you're heady. Can we go emotional? You know, then all of a sudden you trigger potentially a defensive reaction in the other.
Yeah. And alienating.
Alienating, yeah. And then they call me afterwards.
Does that happen a lot?
It's happened twice.
Okay.
Bambos wanted something from me. Is it okay? Is it okay? Like they'll feel a little bit like, did I give you what you needed? Because they'll feel that was your desire and they didn't necessarily feel comfortable doing it. So they'll feel this sort of tension, like, did I give him what he needed? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like from us discussing sales today, it was all across the board, which was beautiful because in a way, as you mentioned, sales is basically all across the board. And if you look at it, I would say, you could say sales is also and mostly about persuasion, persuading people to do something. And in every way we're, even if we're not aware of it, persuading people. Yeah. Through how we dress, through even being quiet, just by the mere fact we're in the same room as someone, we're already having an influence on them without even our awareness of that. So our influence can take all different shapes and forms. And I personally have really enjoyed in my life supporting people in a way to see that sales is nothing more than facilitating somebody else's brain and facilitating it so that person gets clear so that they may want to purchase something in the end. And if that other person's brain isn't clear, then they're likely to procrastinate and not move forward. So the sales cycle takes a lot longer. And obviously that's not the ideal. The ideal is that it moves as fast as forward and yet take you and the other into account. That's basically a lot of courses on it. Too much time in my early years spent, and now basically none, except that's sometimes what I'll speak about just because I have such a passion around it. we're to our hour. Sales reinvented, Bambos.
Apparently so, Andy.
Apparently, this is where we are. Tomorrow, we've got Kelly McCabe on. Kelly McCabe founded eMindful, which is the world's leading corporate mindfulness program. Amazing company. Go into insurance brokers who then sell their services off to corporations. And what the corporations do is they say, listen, we're going to offer mindfulness to everyone in the company. And all you've got to do is you've got to click on a link once a day. And there's 5 different programs: lose weight, stop smoking, reduce stress, and on and on. And she founded that company because she herself found mindfulness after working in New York on the financial district of New York. She's a rough and tough lady from Florida. Hopefully she doesn't have COVID by the time we talk to her. And she's...
Why would you say that?
Because Florida is like epicenter of COVID at the moment. It's really bad there. So we look forward to talking to her, and yeah, it'll be really fun because she's a sassy woman. That's what I would say. A sassy woman. We'll see you tomorrow, hopefully then on A Wonderful Chaos. Bye-bye.